The concept of diversity encompasses acceptance and respect. It means understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing our individual differences. These can be along the dimensions of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, or other ideologies. It is the exploration of these differences in a safe, positive, and nurturing environment. Today's training will focus on unconscious bias and the relationship between unconscious bias and inequities in the American education system. Unconscious bias is prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor of or against one person or group as compared to another in a way that is generally unfair. Unconscious biases develop at an early age. Biases emerge during middle childhood and appear to develop across childhood. All people have unconscious biases. It is necessary for people to recognize their biases, or there is no way they can be corrected. Since unconscious biases develop from a young age, no individual can claim that they do not have unconscious bias. Professor of Social Psychology Claude Steele explains, unconscious bias is far more prevalent than conscious prejudice and often incompatible with one's conscious values. Certain scenarios can activate unconscious attitudes and beliefs. For example, biases may be more prevalent when multitasking or working under time pressure. Unconscious biases are everywhere, from the neighborhood that we choose, the close friends that we have, to the people we date. Developments in neuroscience now demonstrate that many biases are formed throughout life and held at the subconscious level, mainly through societal and parental conditioning. We gather millions of bits of information and our brain processes that information in a certain way, unconsciously categorizing and formatting it into familiar patterns. Though most of us have difficulty accepting it or acknowledging it, we all do it. Gender, ethnicity, disability, sexuality, body size, profession, etc. all influence the assessments that we make of people and form the basis of our relationship with others and the world at large. Three manifestations of unconscious bias in the education system are teachers assuming students with names that are more common among African American and Latinx communities will perform less well on exams than students with the names that are more common among white Americans. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white peers. Starting in preschool, students of color often experience microaggressions, both from teachers as well as their peers, which can be both psychologically and physically demanding. Dr. Van Dyke completed her dissertation on uncommon black names in the classroom. She found that students with distinctive black names were subject to disrespect, stereotypes, and low academic and behavioral expectations from their teachers. This resulted in strained relationships, changes in future career choices, and self-esteem issues, ultimately leading to fewer educational and economic opportunities for students of color. Teachers are unconsciously biased toward certain students. These unconscious biases lead teachers to favor white students, give them more acceptance, academic help, and social support. To understand unconscious bias, consider two students, Susie and Shayla. When Susie walks into the classroom on the first day of class, the teacher smiles. When Shayla walks into the classroom on the first day of school, the teacher looks a little concerned. Not a huge change of expression, and likely not something the teacher intended to do, but a subtle difference Shayla can recognize. The teacher has been socialized to believe that Susie will behave better than Shayla, and she cannot hide this in her response to the children on the first day of class. Susie did not do anything wrong. Shayla did not do anything wrong. They both showed up to class on time and ready to learn. However, Susie will have an easier time because her teacher unconsciously believed that she is ready to learn and is not worried that Susie will have lower test scores. However, Shayla will have to work twice as hard to gain acceptance from her teacher, and since she is spending so much mental effort on getting the same amount of help that Susie is automatically given, Shayla has less time to spend on her actual assignments. This understandably could result in lower test scores and an inability to focus in class. The teacher is unconsciously biased towards Susie. The teacher is biased against Shayla. Because she is black, the teacher treats her in a way that is less encouraging and open. Not all teachers will bias white students in the exact way. White students, no matter what their socioeconomic background, are given better treatment in every classroom in the United States. This is why teachers and administrators in disciplinary roles suspend students of color at a higher rate than white students. While school officials often assume that white students can learn from their mistakes without dire consequences such as suspension, minority students are not given the same treatment. School officials are unconsciously fearful of students of color, which causes them to be suspended more often. Here, Unconscious bias against minority students leads to many minority students being forced to miss days of school. Most white parents do not recognize that their children are being treated better than the parents with children of color. They think nothing is wrong and that their kid just behaves well. However, assuming the system that determines which kids get suspended and which kids don't is denying the reality that school officials are unconsciously fearful of and therefore biased against students of color. White students are given more second chances and days to stay in school than students of color, and this has an effect on academic outcomes. This is a form of racism. As many students of color know, continuously dealing with these stresses can lead to mental fatigue. Claudia Rankine addresses this in her book, Citizen: An American Lyric. In this work, she exposes microaggressions that she and many other persons of color have experienced. Dealing with microaggressions becomes part of daily life for many. They contribute to mental exhaustion, and as students, when people of color have to worry constantly about how they are being perceived and how people are acting aggressively towards them, focusing on classwork becomes increasingly difficult. Because the majority of people are biased to assume the best in white students do not have to suffer from these microaggressions. Not recognizing the fact that these microaggressions are happening against people of color is a form of racism. Though looking at unconscious bias can make the prospect of racial equality seem impossible, Claudia Rankine calls all of us to action. She states, "Everyone, black or white, man or woman, young or old, must contribute to undo the corrupt racial system we exist in. However, in order to do this, white people must recognize their biases. Growing up in a society with bias against people of color means being biased against people of color. White people can fight their biases to try and do as little harm as possible, but they cannot deny that their biases exist." Unconscious bias must be studied because the first step to solving a problem is recognizing that one exists. There are many advantages to a diverse learning environment and workforce, and understanding privilege can help us contribute to building these spaces and making them inclusive and safe for everyone.